The Sopranos is a crime drama which follows New Jersey mafia boss Tony Soprano and the issues he must deal with as the head of a crime family and as the father of a household. The show is a cultural phenomenon. Season 6 was split into two and had double the amount of episodes that a standard season had. So I guess you could argue there were 7 seasons, but in any case, it was a healthy run for the show which never outlasted its welcome. It's interesting to ponder on the fact that The Sopranos could have been way shorter. The show's creator David Chase has said that had the pilot not been picked up, he would have shot some more scenes and then released it Tony suffocating his mother. Chase also toyed with the idea of ending the show after season 4, but as the story goes, HBO wanted it to continue and offered him more money to keep it going, so it went on for 2 more seasons. However, apparently the show could have been even longer. I believe there's an interview out there where Chase has said that had he known the show would end up as popular as it was, some of the stuff in earlier seasons would have had more time to breathe. Tony and Uncle June's beef, whistling through the wheat fields, whatever happened there, would have been stretched over 2 seasons as opposed to being wrapped up in a single season, meaning we might have seen more of Junior as boss. In any case, the show is over and done, and aside from a certain movie that was released,
you don't ever admit the existence of this thing. Ever.
There has been no official continuation of the show. But what if there was? What if HBO managed to convince Chase to add a season 7 or season 8 depending on how you look at it? Even back then, some fans theorized that's why we didn't get confirmation as to what happened to Tony Soprano in the show's infamous ending, because the showrunners wanted the opportunity to return to the show. Now, of course, that James Gandolfini is dead, a Sopranos sequel series or movie is obviously dead in the water, though there have been mild mumblings about a prequel series continuing after The Many Saints of Newark. A prequel show, another fucking money machine. But ignore been about. What would it explore? Now, I'm going to try and keep this realistic and explore ideas that feel like they have a connective tissue with what came before. We're not making a Western here. But thinking about it, though there's definitely a lot of material to work with, after all, the world building and the stories and the characters are so good, there are some clear obstacles that are in the way. Let's get the 95-pound elephant in the room out of the way first. If we are being realistic, then season 7 of the show would be shot inside a coffin, looking at a disintegrating corpse, because Tony died in the series thing into a war. We got to see what an aging, decaying mobster with dementia looks like with Junior. We got to see what a mobster dying in prison looks like with Johnny Sack. We got to see what continuous irrelevance looks like with Paulie. We got to see what stagnant and non-existent growth looks like with Christopher. And crucially, we see Tony Soprano at his absolute worst. A hedonistic, selfish, narcissistic individual and not a peep. The knowledge of that, and the abstractness of how it was delivered in the final episode, makes me appreciate The Sopranos ending more, and the possibilities for what will come for Tony are better theorized than actually shown. Whatever happens to him, it won't be good. But I did have a few ideas. Let me know what you think down in the comments section below and what you would have wanted to see in a new season of The Sopranos. And check out a similar video I did for The Wire. So the ending has to be addressed. Season 7 would be predicated on whatever happened there. You can't randomly cut to black and then this isn't even addressed in the follow-up season. So the first thing on the menu is that Tony survives. Perhaps they could address the cut to black by opening with a slow fade to outside of the diner. The shot lingers in anticipation. And then Tony simply walks out of the diner with his family. They get into the car. He says bye to Meadow, but he's looking around slightly nervously, heavy breathing amplified. The point being is that he's constantly paranoid about getting whacked. It would be a bit of a retcon, but it's one way to get around the cut to black by implying it represents Tony's paranoia. Or he could simply wake up with his face plastered in onion rings because the cut to black was a panic attack, again symbolizing his paranoia. You could have it be a heart attack, give him an episode where he recovers in hospital and then is out. But that again would be underwhelming after the ending of the final season and the fact that we've kind of already seen that. It just goes to show how definitive the cut to black works as an ending. One idea I had is that there was a shooting. Hospital would be repetitive after season 6 and would give him too much plot armor, him surviving again. Unless this time he had a permanent injury, like he was wheelchair bound. You could do something with that. Tony is now housebound like Junior was. He feels emasculated because he can't perform anymore, and the Jersey crew is out of control because he can't do anything about it from his wheelchair. But another idea I had is that the shooter misses and AJ gets shot and gets killed instead. Tony gets his Godfather 3 moment by holding his dead child in his arms, killed because the shooter was going for him. This could begin a season of Tony essentially getting his up-and-comings. It would essentially is Tony reveling in his evilness and getting away with it. Season 7 could be the hammer coming down on him getting punished for the life he's lived, like the last season of Boardwalk Empire or Peaky Blinders. It starts with AJ shooting, and it just gets worse from there. He killed his symbolic son in the previous season, so in this one his actual son is taken away from him. It's a season of a constant death. Or maybe he goes to prison halfway through the season, instead of at the end, and we get to follow him around in the can. It would offer a different perspective, life in the can for a mob boss. Yes, we did kind of get this with Johnny Sack, but there's still more you could explore in prison without becoming Oz. The show could take from real life stories like John Gotti. Maybe Tony gets beaten up in prison. Perhaps Dr. Milfier visits him once or twice, and the visits are essentially the new version of the therapy scenes, similar to something we got in The Many Saints of Newark with Dickie Moltisanti and his uncle in prison. Alternatively, you could leave AJ alive and continuing on from season 6, which had him have a lot of screen time, especially towards the end, the boy instead gets a positive ending. He tries to start a career, does more work with Carmine Jr. It could open up a new avenue for the show to do some more subplots. AJ as a asshole porno movie producer with his hand in a few criminal activities. The pitfalls of that industry could be explored through AJ, although this is starting to sound something like The Wire would do as opposed to The Sopranos. Meadows' prominence could be upped, and she essentially completes her trajectory from previous seasons and becomes a fully fledged mob lawyer, a confidant of her father, and perhaps even part of the team that defends him in court. Maybe Tony has her as a go-between between him and Paulie, who is struggling to retain control over the family with dissenting youngsters and an encroaching New York. Lawyer Meadow and acting boss Paulie, the new surprise relationship in the show maybe. Uncle Paulie, there was no abundant intentionality in me asking for a plea deal. Of course, you could go back to the diner scene as well and do something more with it. Maybe it's a mystery as to who tried to kill Tony, and who tried to whack Tony Soprano is one of the major questions of the season. One thing you could do, and perhaps this sounds more like a season 8 than a 7, but a flash forward to Tony coming out of the can after lengthy prison time. I mean, it wouldn't work because we would basically have a Sopranos season set in the future. But the idea of it is interesting. I kind of got this idea after watching American Gangster, where Denzel Washington at the end comes out of the prison, and I think kind of the idea is that he's entered a whole new world he doesn't understand. Tony in a new world, trying to adjust. Kids like Walden are higher ups, maybe the boss even, and Tony just can't bring himself to respect these kids. He is now the Feech, the Richie of the modern age, the bitter old man clutching to his previous glories, while in the meantime, the younger guys have moved up. It brings things full circle, with Tony being the out-of-date old-timer who nobody really needs anymore. Now obviously, what we're talking about in this video is discussing Tony and the established characters. It goes without saying that like every season, new characters and therefore new plots would be introduced as the main meat of the season. And that could simply be anything. Maybe a mobster who gets a lot of attention from the media, a la John Gotti, and it rubs the crew the wrong way. Maybe New York swallows up New Jersey like Ginny Sack on a chocolate binge, and as a result we see a lot more of not just the Lupitazzi family, but the other New York families too. There's loads of possibilities. Maybe Carlo is even assassinated as a kind of retcon, so Tony is free, and we get whatever storylines the show wants to do for him. It would be interesting to see what they do with Silvio, with him being one of the last key surviving characters. Does he stay in his coma indefinitely? Does he recover and have storylines dedicated to him? Maybe he solidifies his power with Tony in the can, or does a poor job of keeping the crew under control while being a buffer in between the street guys and Tony in the can. But this probably wouldn't work. If Silvio's waking up, Carlo's testimony will surely send him down with Tony. Maybe the feds trying to get him to flip and turn on Tony could be explored. But going back to Tony, It would be interesting to see him trying to rebuild the DeMeo family while preparing for his trial. He'd be like Junior in season 1, selfish, outdated, the cost of his trial making the crew wonder if it's even worth having Tony around. Tony questions the loyalty of the likes of Paulie and Patsy and is forced to move the likes of Walden and Benny up. The trial of Tony Soprano could be a big part of the season, essentially a rewrite of what they were going to do originally in season 3 with Livia and the tickets before Nancy Marchant died. Will he stand tall? Will he flip? The crew wonders. Walden slyly floats the idea of Tony not being around anymore. Paulie won't hear of it and makes a scene. Patsy is quiet, giving nothing away. Benny is getting beaten up by someone again. Janice could start acting more and more like Livia, and of course Carmela would be a fascinating character to explore. Maybe the truth about Adriana's disappearance is laid bare at the trial. Maybe all sorts of affairs that Tony has had are discussed in court, humiliating Carmela, alienating her and forcing her to reconcile who and what she is. She gets her reckoning along with Tony in this season, as the finances of Tony's trial take their toll. She loses her social status as the boss's wife, and we see how the other women change towards her. Maybe it concludes with her, in her desperation, going to Angie's body shop and asking for work as a secretary or something. And the last time we see Carmela, she is looking utterly flushed and defeated, as Angie clicks her fingers at her, beckoning her over, a clear bookend to what Carmela did to Charmaine in season 1. She could also latch on to another mobster for a cash flow, a bit like how Roe went with Ralph after Jackie Sr., but that was a bit of a different situation as Jackie had died, whereas obviously Tony's still alive. Artie could get an arc. Without Tony's protection, his luck goes downward. Benny looms in the distance, but eventually Artie gets out from under it all and has a happy ending. The meaning behind his arc being that he's free from Tony's toxicity. So that's all I had really. What do you think? What would you have liked to have seen explored in a season 7 of the show? All hypothetical, of course. Let me know in the comments section below. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for more videos, and thanks for watching.